Joining me now to discuss the connection between AI and CX is Luke Norris. He's the Vice President of Platform Strategy and Digital Transformation at Granicus. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Candace. So glad to be here.
So just let's start off and lay the groundwork for me. Are there any core lessons, or I guess I should say, what core lessons, AI lessons, has the government community learned so far?
Oh man, such a great question. I think there are probably so many. Clearly AI is here. It's not going anywhere. So I think that has been a good lesson that, it's not a fad. We probably are still in the hype cycle, but it is absolutely a technology that is transforming rapidly, transforming quickly, and is going to be here to stay. So I think that's one. The second is, I think, specifically for Gen AI, absolutely, Gen AI can have transformative impacts for governments in a variety of ways. It can streamline how government staff do their job, helping them be more efficient with finding, accessing, creating, and leveraging, large language models to create content to help, streamline parts of their job. So that absolutely, we've seen. On the other side, we've seen governments completely benefit from generative AI digital agents that can be used to actually power better resident to government interactions. And I think what we've specifically seen here is that the way that those operate is really driven by the content and the data that they have access to. And so I think, AI has been so exciting for so many people that it's been looked at from the lens of technology first. But I think when we step back and see what we've learned at Granicus is that generative AI digital agents that harness the power of AI are only as good as the underlying content. And the content is a place where governments have a lot of opportunity to make investments to make sure that those content and data sets are clear, actionable, provide great guidance, and are really curated to help governments be able to better serve their residents.
That's great. There are so many important lessons, and I love the idea of the it's only as good as the data that feeds it. How can AI help agencies improve their service delivery? Because that's such a big part of what government does.
Yeah, great question. So I think pulling back to what we were just chatting about, conversational digital agents are absolutely going to be the way that governments will begin serving their residents, certainly in 2025 and increasingly in 2026 and beyond, right? It is likely to become the new user interface that residents will expect and demand. And so to make that helpful, residents are going to expect to be able to come and ask a number of questions, and those questions are going to pull from content and data that these digital agents have access to. And so one of the ways that governments can harness them is making sure that they are leveraging more than just a large language model, that they are curating digital agents like our Granicus government experience agent to actually be pointed at and curating specific sets of data that can help residents interact with government. The next is they can do a lot of tuning to make sure that those agents are empathetic and understand and know the context of government to citizen interactions, right? We use so many different words in government, like, the benefits and program and beneficiaries or permits or licenses. When you think about that in a local context, digital agents have to have that context to be able to provide these empathetic conversations to residents. And then the last part of it is, agentic AI is absolutely going to be part of the new frontier. That is where more and more governments are going to invest in having digital agents that can help automate tasks for both government staff and eliminate workflow and inefficiencies in processes, but also to help residents navigate complex systems by being able to automate some of those tasks. So I really think what you'll see is the combination of generative AI and agentic AI, certainly together over the next year, will really be some of the ways that governments will start using those two technologies to deliver much better services to their residents.
So what's the role of agentic AI in particular? How does that technology factor in?
Yeah, it's a great question. Agentic AI is really unique. So I think there's a couple of things that we've got to think about, right? First, in the near future, people like us may grant authority to agents to operate on our behalf whether it's scheduling an appointment or helping do things to make our individual lives as people easier. And governments are going to have to reconcile with the ability to actually serve an agent on behalf of me as a person or on behalf of you as a person, right? So there's new kind of, challenges that'll create. More so on the back end of kind of these government to resident interactions is where I think you'll also see a lot of opportunities where agentic will take hold, right? So agentic AI kind of has a variety of different ways that it can support governments, from task automation to actually automating multiple processes to orchestrating really complex systems where it's starting to make decisions and ultimately do things on behalf of a government staff worker, the government itself, to really drive some level of better efficiency in the system. So increasingly, what I think we'll see is, governments really trying to prioritize which experiences or what services have potentially the most waste or the most redundancy or are not optimized, and how could agentic AI help automate or streamline that interaction to eliminate some of that waste or eliminate some of that friction for a government to resident interaction, so that it really could be as seamless as possible, where maybe now as a person, someone doesn't have to go to this system or to this system or to this web page or to this web page, and certainly not to this form or to this form, to actually be able to do something that's relatively complex that may require a lot of different touch points with the government.
So let's talk about domain expertise for a second. So how important is it when it comes to designing AI workflows that actually work within the complex framework of the public sector? Because government has a lot of complexity. So how does domain expertise help in that regard? And actually, what do we mean by domain expertise too? If we could just back up for a second too.
Yeah, I love that you asked this question. So, I think what we have certainly found, at Granicus is technology alone is not enough, right? AI is a fundamental technology that's going to enable and empower, and I like to talk about augment a lot of intelligence that's going to help us become even more, successful in the things that we do. But that domain expertise or that frontline knowledge of your business processes, your customer pain point, your actual content is really, really critical, and I don't think can be overlooked, right? So we spend a lot of time helping our customers understand that to make use of AI, we have to connect those business leaders and those frontline staff with the technology and the residents to make sure that they're building it with, not just for the people that are going to use these interactions, because it's typically those folks that have that domain knowledge that understand why the process is so cumbersome or what people fail to be ready to be able to do, where that is really helpful information, because that's where then the agentic AI or the generative AI can help fill in some of those pieces. So I love that you asked the question, because I think, every single person that's thinking about AI must think about it as more than just technology. And it's going to be really critical that we're making investments in the skills, the curiosity, the mindset that we all have to have as people, building new government interactions. But we also have to make sure that we have people that understand those processes and the domain expertise behind those processes, so that we can really think about how we simplify those processes. So absolutely, tech, people, and process here are going to come into focus far more probably than ever before because of agentic AI.
Yeah, technology doesn't exist in isolation.
Right.
There.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about system interoperability a little bit. So like a lot of agencies, too many, rely on legacy systems and silo data, and that presents a lot of challenges. So when it comes to maximizing the potential of agentic AI, what role does system interoperability play? So, the ability of systems and tools, et cetera, to talk to each other and work together smoothly.
Yeah, it's a great question. Absolutely. Integration is critical, especially for agentic AI use cases, to really be able to power better government to resident experiences, to be able to help people execute on customer journeys and experiences that do require connectivity to back-end systems. So, similar to how we talked about the importance of investing in content, a key part is understanding where is all of that data, what data systems are interoperable. Do they have existing APIs? Will they have existing APIs? Which systems maybe have the most connectivity that can help power the most intelligent or the most expansive ROI, where you could really think about integrating with one service, right? So for the last, probably 10, 15 plus years, I'm sure even longer for some of us, we've really been talking about APIs, application processing interfaces, right? Now what we're seeing is an emergence of something called MCP, which is modern context protocols. So these are solutions that actually are really helping harness the power or automating the intelligence of which systems do you connect to for which information, and starting to make some of those decisions around, I'm going to go get information from system A and I'm going to go pull other business logic from system B. And that now is increasingly going to happen in these kind of integration or these operational layers called modern context protocols. And so all of that comes back to saying, that more than ever, the content's critical, but so is the data and the interoperability of the data. And so I think, AI and certainly agentic AI is going to put the magnifying glass back on the fact that we have a lot of systems that may not be able to access that information. And we'll have to find new ways to be able to do that through other exports or other ways. And it's certainly going to drive the industry forward to absolutely be as interoperable as possible.
That's such an interesting point. How do you see agentic AI workflows creating new forms of public value?
Ooh, yeah, that's an exciting one. I think that you'll see agentic AI be able to understand what someone is really thinking about, or what the pain or what the frustration is, and being able to understand much more quickly and easily what it is that they can do or what it is that they should do to eliminate that friction. So I think agents soon will be able to understand someone's intent, understand the pain and frustration, and think about ways that that experience can become streamlined for individual use cases, where it's going to start to make a decision about, hey, maybe for Candace, we need to expedite and do this, but for Luke, we need to go through a more linear process, where again it can just automate based on individual use cases. Will certainly be interesting. Ultimately, all of that being guided at the idea of trying to eliminate some of the frustration and make these experiences as effortless as possible. And so what I think that'll start to look like is, can it and how does it start to eliminate some of the kind of, redundant steps, some of the unnecessary steps, to actually drive simplicity in those experiences, to just make it as effortless as possible.
So let's talk a little bit about data governance. What are some rules to live by? That's a big question, right? But so what are some priorities, things that agencies really should take into account?
Yeah, well, absolutely. They should start investing in data governance now if they haven't yet today. And I think data governance has to be a shared responsibility, just like as we were talking about the critical importance of that domain expertise. IT or, information CIO's offices probably should govern how, content governance looks and data governance looks and is managed. But absolutely, it needs to be owned by the individual business units. I was recently at an event with a number of state CIOs and large kind of city CIOs. And one of the individuals made the, kind of point that from a central IT perspective, governance is really going to be about trying to eliminate the most significant levers of risk, right? How do you do that in a kind of enterprise wide, but actually then enable the individual business lines to be the ones that are ultimately responsible for categorizing data, assessing risk, and then managing and mitigating that risk. In part because I think, as you've maybe pointed out, this is just moving so fast and the technology is iterating so fast that we don't want data governance policies to slow down or harness or squelch the innovation. But at the same time, we want to drive for security and standards. And so I do think in the kind of new frontier, you'll see a kind of, co-owned or a co-shared environment of data governance, where there's large enterprise kind of management in CIOs and CTOs offices, but that it becomes slightly more decentralized, where the actual business agencies are ultimately the ones responsible for governance from a Gen AI and an agentic AI data governance perspective.
How can agencies, talking about best practices now, so how can agencies better use technology, specifically AI, to improve the constituent experience?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is, like any good project, right? You have to start with a goal in mind. So I think understanding where are those high friction points for your residents, right? What are the processes that we know they aren't doing online that they should be able to do online? How do you start to create some of that channel shift by enabling these more effortless experiences so that people can really find what they're looking for, quickly understand what they need to do, but then be able to actually go through the process of getting those things done right then and there. So that's one big piece of it. The other piece, though, I think is absolutely about making sure that we rethink what those steps and processes could be, right? Sometimes some of those experiences are layered in bureaucracy and policy mandates where the policy on top of the policy makes it really complex. So, how can you use some of the AI capabilities to streamline and modernize some of those experiences to, again, be more optimized, more efficient, to help get the resident through that actual interaction as quickly as possible, but then complete some of those other services later on where you need some of the supplemental information. So, what I would say is at the end of the day, though, if you don't start with a goal in mind of eliminating the amount of time that it takes to process an application, eliminating the number of steps that it takes, or a goal of increasing satisfaction, we're probably going to overlook actually how we build these solutions to achieve those goals. And then again, we'll probably fall victim to some of the idea of just doing it for the sake of technology as compared to actually focusing on really key outcomes.
How do you see government's use of AI evolving in the next 2, 3 years or so?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think about it very optimistically, but I think also very pragmatically, right? So for, some of your audience, I've been around the GovTech landscape for the better part of 15 years, right? So I've seen the hype cycle of cloud and the hype cycle of agile and the hype cycle of kind of user-centered design, some of which never fully scaled, in part because governments didn't actually invest in the people skills, the mindsets, the behaviors, or the processes that it took to actually allow those capabilities to scale, or certainly to scale as fast as they could. And so I think AI, in part because of how it's transforming our own lives, I think we'll see people adopt and adapt AI capabilities in their flow of work inside of government probably a lot more quickly. But I think for it to actually achieve its benefits, we've got to make sure that governments are continuing to invest in those people skills, mindsets, and those behaviors, rethinking what some of the competencies are of the people that we need, where maybe, it's less around their ability to do very specific jobs, but to become more curious or, to be more experimental and really think about things critically, to always make sure and validate that some of the capabilities are true, accurate, and all of those things, right? So I think you'll see a little bit of a shift in that. But at the same time, I think you'll absolutely see an increase in the amount of AI capabilities used inside of government. And while I'm super optimistic that that's going to be like explosive, I do think that we're going to continue to always think about, how do you do it in a way that's responsible? How do you do it in a way that's ethical? How do you do it in a way that's, equitable for all of the individuals that are going to be experiencing this? And so because of that responsibility that governments have that are somewhat different than commercial enterprises, I don't know that we'll see it be full sail taking over everything. That I think sometimes there's some of this hype cycle and all of this buzz out there that, it's going to eliminate people's jobs. I don't really believe that's going to be the case, certainly in the next 1 to 2 years. But I really think that's where we also have to make sure that we're, again, thinking about this, not necessarily just as AI, artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. So again, by really investing in the people side of this, that's where I think we can have even much more transformative impacts than we even conceive today. Because the more we equip the people closest to the customers that understand some of the processes, understand some of the issues and the pain that residents feel, and equip them with new capabilities, that's where I think we'll see the most transformation. And so I really hope everyone listening and all of us continue to lean into that rather than, again, just riding the hype cycle of AI over the next couple of years.
So Granicus has a lot of experience working with government agencies. So how does Granicus in particular help organizations use technology to meet constituent expectations in a strategic and thoughtful and really efficient way?
Yeah, love that question. So, we do have the unique opportunity to have worked with something like 7,000 government organizations across federal, state, local governments, both internationally as well as here in the US and in Canada. We believe that artificial intelligence and digital technologies have an opportunity to help improve service delivery, increase community engagement, and drive operational efficiencies. And so our focus is making sure that we understand the goals and outcomes that our customers are trying to achieve, and that we help them identify the solutions, the technology, the data, and the experience services that they need to be able to achieve those outcomes. And I think that's what's really exciting about where I sit and where we sit as a company, is we're able to draw these conclusions from insights that we gather across, something like 30 billion interactions between residents and governments every year, 300 million people that use our technology to interact with their governments. We're able to identify how are people's behaviors changing, how are people using technology in new ways, but we also glean insights from that help us make sure that we're supporting governments with those experience services. How do you improve your content? How do you understand what the steps are of a process? How do you eliminate the waste and friction of it? How do you rebuild processes to be simpler and easier? How do you create culture change and manage change management by de-risking AI as just this thing that's going to take people's jobs, to instead focus on how do you enable people to think about how AI can be used to change their flow of work, so that ultimately you all are centered on these goals and outcomes around service delivery, in community engagement, and operational efficiency. So our approach is, we are a technology company, obviously, and very proud of that, but we're also a technology company that knows technology alone is not enough. And that's why we really focus on making sure that we help our customers leverage solutions that are ultimately tailored at helping them achieve their desired goals and impacts.
That's such a great way to put it. Now, the probably the hardest question I'm going to ask you. You can only leave our audience with two takeaways.
Oh, goodness.
So of all things, what two takeaways would you like our audience to know?
Well, let's start with Gen AI, right? Because that's where I think we're all anchored in today. Your content and your data is perhaps as important, if not more important, than the technology that you use. So absolutely, everyone today, whether you're investing in a Gen AI solution or thinking about a Gen AI solution, the first and most important thing that you can do is really dive into that content and dive into that data, and don't overlook the importance of doing that. The second thing that I think I'm just really personally, focused on, and that I would leave as my second piece, is don't overlook the fact that there is a human element, and that the ability for AI to have the transformation requires all of us to invest in our own skills, lean into our own curiosities, to understand how these technologies can be used, and to experiment and test and learn and iterate. But systemically, organizational leaders have to prioritize making sure that they're investing in helping government staff build new skills, that they are equipping people with the opportunities to experiment, that they're doing that in a safe way that allows for people to fail and test and learn, but ultimately to really help folks understand that don't just think about AI as something that's going to take away your job. Think about it as something that can really help you do your job more. Because I think the more we all lean into that, that's where I think we'll see key transformations.
So where do you seek inspiration on where governments are using Gen AI and what their capabilities are?
Yeah, interesting. There's a variety of places that I, typically try to follow. GovLaunch is a great kind of local government wiki where they curate a variety of stories. The National League of Cities has actually done a lot to survey some of the ways that AI is being used in government contexts, for sure. What I always love is when you all are helping folks tell their stories. And so what I would love is more folks to really share with GovLoop, some of the ways they're thinking about using generative AI, and specifically how they're using it to champion kind of better government to citizen interactions, so that you all maybe can help tell some more of those stories. Because I do think, it's being used, but we're certainly going to see explosive use, and there's going to be so many more great examples that folks can help us all learn from in the future.
Thank you so much for taking time with me today. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really
Yeah, thank you for
wonderful.
the great questions, and always excited to read your articles and the organization's articles. They really help shape how I think, and appreciate everyone for sharing all that great content.
Thank you so much.